Greetings and welcome to Truth in Conversation. Welcome back to those who are repeat viewers. I welcome you to like, subscribe, share, and comment. All right, so today what I want to talk about. Actually, I had a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, and I was undecided as to which I would talk about. And so I what I've decided on is a type of hybrid because these two subjects actually go go together. I wanted to talk about the church and I wanted to talk about narcissism. So I and this is a two subjects which I don't have to really choose uh, between to talk about because in fact if I talk about narcissism, I will have to talk about the church. And if I talk about the church, I will have to talk about narcissism. It's a very odd couple. Odd in the sense that intuitively it doesn't seem like they go together, but not odd in the sense that you usually find them together. So, all right. So let me talk about first of all why it's important to talk about narcissism. It's very important to talk about narcissism and the context of this show. And once again, for people who are not familiar with this show and the subject and the purpose of this show is to build male female relationships. It's uh, it's a counteract to the culture that we've been experiencing over the last 20 years, especially. Now, it's a culture, actually, narcissism and complicated and difficult relationships between male and female has been a thing for quite a long time. And in fact, in American culture, it has been like a main thing, I would say, since the 60s. However, it's been greatly accelerated in the last 20 years. So, my show is my podcast is designed or is purposed to counteract a lot of that negative culture that is being forced onto us. So, to that end, I want to talk about narcissism because narcissism is one of the main, if not the main thing that is disrupting, complicating, destroying relationships. All right, let me say that again. So, I just want you to let that soak in and understand the severity of the situation. Narcissism is one of the main things, if not the main thing, that is destroying relationships. So, and it's narcissism is a thing that a lot of people don't know about. It would have really helped me if I had known and studied and understood narcissism. My God, I really wish I had understood this. Wow, from the beginning of time. Just put it like that, because I was born into a narcissistic family. Like everyone in my immediate family is a narcissist. Now, some of my family I haven't seen in many years, and through my studies and recounting and remembering my interactions with them, I understand that they were narcissists. And of course, my family that I have seen in more recent history, I have more recent history of behavior to go on. So I can say without a doubt that everyone in my immediate family is a narcissist. Now they vary on the spectrum, and I don't recall the whole spectrum. Where you have covert and overt narcissists. You have the I forget the term that is used, but you can use the term needy narcissist, like a dependent narcissist. So you have different types of narcissists, and uh, somewhere in that spectrum, I can find my whole family, and it explains a lot. So if I was armed with this information decades ago, my life would have been better. That brings up one of my first points that I want to share with you about narcissism and narcissistic relationships. When a narcissistic relationship is over by your choice or the other person in the relationship choice or whatever means that a narcissistic relationship ends, count it all joy. Count it all joy. The time lost, the time spent, the headache, all of that, the sufferings, count it all joy. Rejoice in that relationship is over with. A lot of times we get bogged down in life because of narcissistic relationships, uh, because of the sense of loss. It's like a grief, like how you spent years and decades in this relationship that you had expectations for, that you had desires to build upon, etc. And this was true for me in the church I grew up in. So this narcissistic relationship can go beyond just an individual, right? Because it can be institutional. And uh, when I say institutional, it's kind of a odd thing to say, to refer to narcissism as as, or put it, to kind of imply that an institution can be narcissistic or a narcissist, when in fact it can, because usually in these institutions there's a culture setter, and that culture setter is usually the person in charge. Sometimes I I believe sometimes it cannot be the person in charge officially, because very often you find um, narcissists, you know, uh, not who actually bear rule through someone else. This is common in, let's say, a family, in a married couples, when you have the man who is supposed to be in charge, and then you have the wife, especially when you have those so-called traditional settings of religious families, where there's in their church, the man is understood to be the head. In that setting, you will find a lot of times that the man would be officially acknowledged as the head, so as to take responsibility for whatever goes wrong. But the person pulling the strings and making the decisions through that man is the wife, the woman. You find this a lot in church. You find this a lot in life. And that is a narcissistic relationship. Anytime you have someone ruling through someone else, that's narcissistic. That's a narcissistic relationship. When someone, everything about that is narcissistic. First and foremost, the control element, and the fact that she doesn't want to take responsibility for what goes wrong, but she will surely take credit for what goes right. That's narcissism in a nutshell. So I am making these videos because I'm trying to help others. Uh, Perhaps you're not as far along in your life and your development of what and whatever aspect of life you're in, and you're having a tough time with people. Well, I'm helping you basically get ahead of where I might have been at that time because I had no idea about narcissism. Uh, Typically, as with narcissists, I blamed myself for all the difficulties that I had to a point. Then I got to a point where I blamed myself. I guess I could see it in not so articulate terms, less, but yet too much. And that leads me to something that I've learned in life. A lot of again points back to narcissism. Narcissism is more prevalent in our lives than we know. It's prevalent in our thoughts, our theology, our uh, mores, our so-called virtues. Narcissism has imposed itself on all of these things. And I'm gonna give you an example of narcissism because a lot of times culture is shaped by certain sayings that we have, certain proverbs and certain so-called wisdoms that we have and that we take to be true. For example, there's this mantra or idea, ideology of personal responsibility. And oftentimes, when you have people arguing about right and wrong and justice in our society, a lot of times it will boil down to an argument between personal responsibility and social responsibility. And both sides assume to be right. Now, a lot of times, the argument on either side is narcissistic. And that's the thing about narcissism. There's no balance. Everything about narcissism is a lack of balance because it's all about the narcissist. My way or the highway. The way I think is the truth, right? So a narcissist, whatever they make up in their mind to be true, that is what's true. So that's why, for example, you have people that's arrested by the police, and they ask the police why are they under arrest, and the police tell them, and they say, I'm not under arrest. Okay, that's part of narcissism right there, because yes, you are. Two, they will deny what the police said they did. And guess what? Police are wearing body cameras these days. So, if you watch YouTube or you've seen it in person, so often you will find a person that's been arrested for a crime that was caught on camera. A lot of times before the police got there, then the police get there and arrest them, and then they're committing more crimes with the police, whether it's assaulting someone, assaulting the police, resisting arrest, and they will sit there and say that they didn't resist arrest, they didn't do these things that they are accused of, and we all watched them do it, and they will vehemently deny that they did what we just saw them do in real time. That's how one-sided narcissism is, because it's just they see things their own way. All right, but nonetheless, arguments about justice, which comes to be an issue when it dealing with narcissists, because narcissists don't have a sense of justice. They have only selfishness. They're driven by their own desire, perspective, will, and ambition. So a lot of times, in the social conversation, things about justice will come up, and then you tend to have two sides: the social justice side and the personal responsibility side, or the social responsibility side, and the personal responsibility side. Now, the way this is even argued is on the narcissistic scale, um, because I'm not going to get into the social responsibility side of how that's narcissism, because that's real complex to describe right now. I want to focus on the personal responsibility side, because that's how I want to help today. So the social responsibility side, um, a lot of times goes too far, because the social responsibility has its place, but sometimes it goes too far in that it wants to uh, absolve oneself of responsibility. That's a narcissistic trait. Okay, on the other hand, we have people that argue only personal responsibility. Okay, now that's also a narcissistic trait, because, yes, narcissists argue whatever is convenient for them at the moment. That's why one way to tell a narcissist is their judgment will be flawed, and that they will contradict their own judgment. That's the easiest way to determine a narcissist, through observation. And I really encourage people to do that, to observe people's judgment, right? And see if they contradict what their judgment is about, you know, just about anything, especially when in regards to personal responsibility, right? Because you will hear them argue both sides, uh, a lot of times within the same argument. But I want to concentrate on the personal responsibility side. The personal responsibility side of the argument of, let's say, justice. Um, a lot of course, narcissists would like to argue that side, for specific reasons. A lot of times it's done to justify themselves when they victimize someone. This is a way, a lot of times, that narcissist does one of their favorite things, which is gaslight. Gaslight is basically Gaslighting is when you victimize someone and make them feel like it's their fault. That's gaslighting. And here's one of the tools of gaslighting that you hear in the social conversation, through media, whatever. There's a phrase that it probably comes out of the church. I think it was the first place I heard it, but now I hear it in different places outside the church, and sometimes it's not from people that are necessarily in the church or have some spiritual connection with the church or anything like that. But here's a phrase, because, like I said, people coin phrases and mantras in order to further their cause and convince you, because when the mantra sounds reasonable and it sounds clever, people tend to accept it. It's more easily digestible by the mind. So people use this, and a lot of narcissists use this. If you've ever heard, when you point the finger, there's three pointing back at you. Now, in that is a connection between narcissism and the church, because you get that in the church all the time. If you go to church, you always find the pastor making loose connections between things. He'll take something symbolic and connect it with something real and act like there's a connection, and use that to connect to a absolute lie to a truth, to a two mutually exclusive facts. He will make as if they concur by using this crazy type of logic with symbolism, or whatever. Such as one when they say, anytime you point the finger, there's three pointing back at you. Um, Shut up. Because that's a lie on every level. Because they're using the symbolic um, look of pointing, right? Let me point my finger, right? Pointing my finger, right? Now, the only finger I'm pointing is my index finger. It's the only finger I'm pointing, right? These three fingers are not pointing. I don't know if you can see it, but they are not pointing. That's not pointing, right? But because people, our minds, the human mind is shaped to fill in gaps of impressions, uh, so that we can make out images, right? So, like for example, you see my background, all right? Those your mind automatically can imagine the rest of this lioness face, even though it's cut off. In fact, you can imagine the rest of the lion's forehead and ears and mane, even though it's cut off. So that's something that's designed in the human mind to do. So these liars, including these false preachers, they play on that. They use these loose connections to suggest things in your to put images in your mind where the missing part you will fill in. Like when they say, when you point the finger, three are pointing back at you. No, it's not. But you make the image of these three fingers be pointing, even though by definition they are not pointing. So they're trying to get traction based on the way they can make something make sense to you through imagery. All right. So they want to overstate personal responsibility by creating an image in your head of what it looks like to point, and then have you juxtapose a lie onto that imagery and say, okay, these three fingers are pointing. No, they're not pointing. But the whole thing is a lie, which is aimed at the person who may be making a right and justifiable accusation. Ultimately, when I'm saying this to say this, I run across a lot of people suffering from mental health, and what I find is that two things is common between the people I talk to that suffer from mental health: church and abuse. Not all the ones that abuse are abused in the church, but I don't think I've talked to anyone who was suffering from mental illness who was not abused. And what I find is the main reason for the persistence of this mental illness, where these people do not get well, is that they are never able to appropriately give their victimizer their just due, their blame, the responsibility for their actions, for their abuse. Because it's usually someone they honor to their own hurt, someone that they would normally think could do no wrong, like a parent. I've heard of also coaches, people in positions of social responsibility, familial responsibility, spiritual responsibility. All of these people, I find, have some of them have hurt these people who are suffering from mental illness. And upon talking to them, I learned that they don't want to blame or put all of the blame that goes to the victimizer on the victimizer. And that's very important for overcoming mental health issues, um, because the big, to me, in my experience, the biggest obstacle to mental wellness is self wounding. Right? If you are in a war and you get shot, and then you keep going and you're fighting, you have the medic right here, and the medevac, you have access to it, but you don't stop and get healing and say, hey, I've been shot, I'm wounded, I need to be fixed before I return to battle. You won't get any better if you keep denying that you've been shot. You won't get any better. It goes hand in hand when you don't give your victimizer the proper blame for victimizing you. When you don't put on them, even the scripture says, give unto others what's due to them. Give honor to whom honor is due. Right? So that also means to give credit for the victimizer. Right? This, and I'm saying this from personal experience. This is something that's helping me, where I'm able to give the blame. And a lot of times things hurt so bad, you don't even want to acknowledge the hurt, for one. And then if you do acknowledge the hurt, the person that hurt you is sometimes so important to you, you don't want to acknowledge them as the being responsible for that hurt. Even if you know that they did it, you somehow want to mitigate or justify what they did. Or you might say something like, you deserved it. Like, something can be done that you know is wrong, but you feel like you did something to make this person do you wrong. And that's not correct. And that's the same as denying that you've been wounded in the battle. So you're steady out here trying to fight for your mental wellness, but you have not addressed what happened and who did it. Or you should have not acknowledged the hurt and the person who did the hurt. Because a lot of times we'll acknowledge the hurt, we like that because we can complain about it. Sometimes we use it to bolster our self-empowerment in our victimhood, right? And what do we use victimhood to empower us to do? Wrong, right? When people empower themselves with victimhood, it's always to justify doing wrong and victimizing somebody else or ignoring somebody else's rights. So, in order to get well, we got to be real. We got to be real about what hurts, what hurted, who hurt us, and we got to give it to them. We have to stop justifying them. And a lot of times we think, well, I don't want to hate them. You don't have to hate them. See, because that's a product, and I'm speaking for personal experience, That's a product of gaslighting. Like I feel like I'm a professional when it comes to understanding narcissism. And I only took one class about narcissism. But even before I took the class, I felt like I was a professional on narcissism. Why? Because I've been suffering from it. I've been victimized by narcissists all my life. And my mom's a narcissist. And here's one way she gaslit me for years. She would constantly badger me. I don't even be thinking about her and the evil that she did to me. And she'll come talking about, you ain't forgiving me. You still holding grudges. I don't even be thinking about her. I'll be trying to get on with my life, but she'll bring up, you haven't forgiven me. You're still holding on to the past. No, I was not. But that's a way of gaslighting, right? To get to throw you off, which hinders your ability. To be honest, it's like misdirection. Like when somebody say, "Ooh, look at that bird," and then they, stealing, something from you. That's a misdirection. Because what amongst many things that it was doing, it was keeping me from giving her credit for the harm that she did. I was ignoring a lot of it, which I thought was a good thing. But no, I needed to really focus in on it and see the details, how the whole anatomy and body of her abusive work on my life. It's like, yep, she did that, and she did that, and she did that, and that happened because of that, and she did this, and none of that is pointing the finger back at me. It's pointing the finger at her, and it doesn't mean I haven't forgiven her, doesn't mean I hate her. It just means that I'm healing because I'm acknowledging that I've been wounded. The narcissists don't want you to heal because, for two reasons. Because it just like people want to kill witnesses so that their crime is never uncovered. That's why the narcissist never wants you to heal. In addition, as long as you're not healed, you're more subject to manipulation. So they want to hide the harm that they did to you, and they want to continue to manipulate you. So they use this phrase, when you point the finger, three are pointing back at you. That's a complete lie. That's some pulpit pimping lies. So now, it's very important that you keep narcissists at bay. Narcissists, I've never known one to change. They make life very grievous. They make life a pain, more painful than it has to be. It's a challenge. Every day you got to deal with, you got to overcome, you got to fight. And the way you fight is not with your fists. It's not with evil. You just have to do what is kind of difficult for a lot of us victims of narcissists, which is stand up for yourself. Because a lot of us have been abused by the primary person in our life that is not supposed to abuse us, that's supposed to look out for us, that's supposed to help us and nurture us and raise us and help develop us and push us towards success, right? Our parents, right? So in my life, my mom has been my biggest abuser, the biggest narcissist in my life, from whom I suffered narcissistic abuse, has been my mother. So it's been really hard for me um, to really stand up for myself, because, especially growing up in a so-called sanctified church, you know, they love to harp on this scripture, honor your father and mother. I mean, that they use that to their narcissistic advantage. Pretty sad. Do I believe that scripture? Yes. But my mom took advantage of that scripture. She took advantage of my desire and willingness to be in compliance with that scripture. So, um, and basically she handcuffed me with, like, she would do things to me, and I can go and walk it back. How my abuse happened. Okay, so one of the main tools of abuse, of narcissistic abuse, is creating anxiety. Now, growing up with my mother as a young and older teenager, my greatest experience and memory living in her house was her day and night slamming doors, slamming cabinets, throwing stuff, throwing, just banging and just constantly, and basically in a rage. To the point that it makes no sense for anybody to be so upset every day. And I used to think that it was about her uh, having a issue with the way her life was going. I no longer believe that. I believe that it had nothing to do with where her life was going. She was just intentionally causing anxiety. Because what anxiety does is causes you not to think straight. And when an abuser consistently causes you anxiety, especially as a parent, a child is typically going to try to seek out ways to please and accommodate the parent. Like, don't be mad. What's wrong? Calm down. I mean, like, okay, it's going to be okay. I mean, did I do something wrong? Can I do something better? That was the purpose of the anxiety. And then, if anytime I stood up for myself, she made it as if I was being disrespectful. For all my life, my mother's told this story. So growing up in the sanctified church, we would talk to pray. So, my mother would pray, and then she would make us get down and pray with her. And it seems like a lot of the times it was just me she made to get in prayer with her, because a lot of times I was the only one there because I'm the youngest. And she would be in prayer for hours. And to the extent that I knew she wasn't praying all the time. Sometimes, some of those times, she would sleep. Right? So, but it got to the point, and because she would be on, the only way you can imagine that she was in prayer is because she was on her knees. But she wasn't saying anything. So if she's on her knees for an hour, not saying nothing, you know, anybody can deduce that she's asleep. Okay? So there was a time or times where I went to wake her up because I mean I was a young child. I'm like, you know, I'm like 7, 8 years old. You know, that's abuse right there. Having a 7 or 8 year old in prayer for hours. You're on your knees. They supposed to be on their knees just sitting there for hours until you decide to wake up. So I would go and tap her or call her name, and she would go off on me because she said, "Don't you see I'm praying?" or something to that effect. So as I became a teenager and I had given my life to Christ, and I began to pray and get a habit of praying. And then one time I was in prayer, and she came. I hadn't even been there that long, but she came tapping on me, and I wouldn't respond. And she kept tapping on me, and I would like look up at her like, and then she would keep tapping, and naturally, I just can't you see I'm in prayer? The same way she responded to me. So from that point on, she never let me forget, and she treated it like I was dishonoring, disrespecting her. I was disobedient, and I was not at all. Had no desire to be disobedient, but that's how she framed it, because a narcissist is always in abuse mode. They are always ready to take advantage of a situation in order to create abuse and anxiety. And they don't even have to think about it. It's instinctively. So she used that opportunity to create, basically create a gaslighting moment where I'm feeling bad about standing up for myself. So those are some of the reasons I've had trouble standing up for myself in life, because dealing with my mom, I've been taught to try to make peace and accommodate, not realizing that some narcissists don't want peace. They don't value peace. Only peace they value is yours. And they don't value it for trade. They value it just for thievery. They want to take your peace just so you don't have it. Because then they can manipulate you. Then they can harass you and basically maul you into some subject of theirs. So you will find this type of abuse in all the institutions, whether it's school, whether it's church, whether it's the home. Where people will create chaos out of nothing. God created order out of chaos. The spirit that's in Satan, which is the spirit of narcissism, that's the primary character of Satan, is narcissism. They create chaos out of order. They can't stand order. That's why you find so many women, they refuse to respect men. They would be doing fine. A woman who is herself evil is dictating to them, do this, even being abusive. Then the man come being kind and gentle, but right. And now they want to rebel. Now they want to fight. There's a war. There's a dichotomy in the world, and there's a war between the narcissist and the rest of us. All right, so I just want to, I really didn't get much into the church. I kind of want to leave it there, and we'll be back the next episode, and I'll deal more with narcissism in the church. I just want to make a couple of points. Um, that I did what I was going to say. Church and manipulation goes hand in hand, but we'll say that for next week. Uh, but again, as I started to say, I think I said this in the beginning. One major point that I wanted to make is to rejoice when a narcissistic relationship is terminated, whether it's church, job, whatever. Rejoice because that's a gain. Don't with all the grieving, the hurt, and the loss, that's a gain because narcissists drain, you know, and they hardly, you'll find that narcissists hardly ever are like really down. And that's because their coping mechanism is to press others down. If they ever feel pressed down, even by natural means, let's say somebody break up with them because they was abusing them, they're going to find someone to press down. If something happened by nature, by course, there's a hurricane come and take their home out, they'll find somebody, they start feeling down, they're not going to be down long. They're going to stand on the shoulders of someone else. They're going to press someone else down. All right. So I had more, especially regarding the church, but I just wanted to share that with you for today. And we'll be back on Truth and Conversation on this channel. Again, this is all about male-female relationships, building, and I can find no other subject in order to start with to improve male-female relations than to teach you how to deal with the narcissist in your life. Now, if a narcissist is not in your life, don't get him in your life. And I hope to one day share with you how to identify narcissists. Now I've learned a lot through experience, and still it can be difficult for me to identify them, but it's getting less and less difficult. Uh, it's just, no, you won't be able to identify a narcissist necessarily just by looking at them. Uh, but the idea about being able to identify narcissists is to be able to identify them as quickly as possible. Because the later it takes you to identify a narcissist as such, that's how much more time you've given them to get their claws into you and to abuse you and cause you loss and pain. So, again, I want to share a few things with you uh, along the way that can help you avoid that pain and that loss. And if you're already in one of those relationships, to mitigate that pain and loss by giving you some ways to deal with narcissists. And I'm saying all this from the standpoint of my decades of experience dealing with narcissists, in that I have family, my whole immediate family are narcissists. My former pastor, whom probably has the biggest effect on my life, is a narcissist. Many, um, I would say, um, at least a quarter of the people that was in that church were narcissists. And uh, and I've heard a statistic that narcissists make up 1% of the population, and that's being based on people being diagnosed as narcissists because I guess there's some type of rule that you're not supposed to claim someone is a narcissist unless they've been diagnosed. Well, the problem with that is most narcissists, hardly any narcissist, will get diagnosed because they will never acknowledge something's wrong with them because that's against their whole persona. Because all their thoughts are right, everybody else is thinking wrong. So how can they be a narcissist? They're living in the real world. You're the one having a problem, right? So all of their thoughts are reality, and yours are not. Or you'll hear a statement like "my truth," as if everybody has their own truth, right? That's a narcissistic statement. My truth, as if everybody can have their own truth. That's narcissism, because you're saying I individually make up what the reality is. He make up what the reality is. But then what happens when our reality clash? That's why you can never find peace with a narcissist, because there's no real reality. So no, narcissists make up more than 1% of the population. It's just only 1% gets diagnosed, because chances are narcissists will never seek such help. They will never put themselves in such a vulnerable position so as to admit anything to a clinician, psychologist, to infer that they are wrong, that they have this conceited or arrogance or this disposition or this abusive posture and behavior. All right, so continue to tune in. We're going to share as much about this uh, reality of narcissism and this journey of healing from narcissistic abuse. There's a lot of consequences, social, domestic consequences that come from um, narcissistic abuse that you should be aware of. Uh, so yeah, tuned in. Uh, there's a lot of channels out there uh, that's talking about narcissism. Some of them are because they're counselors and clinicians, and some are. This one guy, he's a diagnosed narcissist. I've listened to his platform, very helpful. But what I hope to provide here, as I said, this is all about building male-female relationships, and this is just one of the subjects that I find necessary to get us to a place where we can improve male and female relationships of all kinds. This is not just romantic or platonic. It's romantic, platonic, familiar, whatever. Because the state of the world, get me. Don't When I say improve male female relationships, don't even think about romantic relationships. Right? Just get that out of your head, because that's not what this is about specifically. That just exists somewhere in male female relationships. But when you look at our society, the way they're pitching feminism and the way they're pitching men against women, and particularly women against men, because they make us the enemy, with terms like toxic masculinity, which is a lie. You see, what they're doing. It becomes very obvious what they're doing, and it's really working, and it's really destructive to families, and certainly to communities, because communities is made up of male and female. So if you plan on having a better life, you better be better at dealing with the opposite gender. But the way we engage with the opposite gender has to be constructive. It can't be based on social media, mainstream media, not even the church. It can be based on scripture, but it can't be based on the church, because the church is a place where I think the most damage is done to male female relationships, as it was in my church. They make us to believe that we don't need each other, which is a lie. It defies the logic of God and the will of God. So continue to tune in if you're interested at all in building and maintaining good relationships, male and female relationships. I thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time.